All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all very much. We appreciate your attendance today. We're going to ask the chambers to please come to a hush, and that will allow us to reconvene. Item number 18, which is where we are in this multi-day process, is a roll call to reestablish the presence of a quorum. We're going to ask the clerk of the board to please call the roll and establish the presence of a quorum.
Supervisor Ellenberg, Supervisor Wasserman, Supervisor Cortese, Vice President Chavez, and President Samidian.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Presence of a quorum having been established, we're going to proceed with our business. The next item is item number 19, the Pledge of Allegiance. So we'll ask all who are able to please stand and join us in the pledge as we are led today by Supervisor Dave Cortese. Supervisor?
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. That takes us to item number 20, which is public comment. And colleagues, we have 4 folks who'd like to speak to us under public comment. That, of course, is the time set aside on our agenda for non-agendized items that are properly within the jurisdiction of this board. So if we could ask Cole Cameron to come on up, and then Lisa Garcia Duke, I believe is the pronunciation. Forgive me if I have that wrong. Then Mike O'Connor, and then Eli Zigas, I believe. And we will say welcome again, and you have up to 3 minutes.
I'm
Please
used to
begin.
my 2 minutes at other board meetings getting cut to 1, so this is fabulous, and I'll keep it short. I just wanted to say thank you for hearing me again. It was good to begin Tuesday. One of my focuses this afternoon, is are you personally ready? What do you have at your desk right now? What do you have in the back room? What about at your office, in your car? Do you have some water? Do you have a whistle? Are you ready? How about at home? Do you have a pair of shoes and a flashlight by your bed? The glass is going to break. The house probably won't fall down. So starting personally and taking it out to your neighborhood. One of the things I sent to you is just a little simple map that allows you to connect with your neighbors. Susan, who's not here today, actually did that as an example in one of my crime prevention CERT meetings. It worked well. It doesn't have to be a disaster or emergency. My garage door is open, you get a call, it gets taken care of. But reconnecting neighbors to neighbors instead of overworked high-tech folks coming home, closing the door, and that's it. So how do we get around that? One of the solutions is, instead of these long lists that get blurry-eyed, we took a program of all those lists of getting ready and broke it down into weekly little small segments. And we're talking with some schools so that they get some community service project time in addition to getting their families ready. It was really great to see my cohorts here from the various fire departments, and I look forward to you giving them more money than they asked for, because that helps us. But those are in the central areas. My request, as I've already sent to you by email, focuses on the neighborhoods. So we've got good central training going on with the Santa Clara County Fire Department, Chief Godden and his team, and working with the others. In every neighborhood, we need funding so that they have some materials locally and get ready. So I want to thank you very much. I'll give my time to fire and more money for them and all these other things that are so important to our community. I thank you very much. And if any of you have an opportunity to support us in our Cambrian Plaza development, so it's extremely fantastic, not just another strip mall, our city council team would love to hear from you.
Thank you very much
for your time this afternoon.
Thank you. And I believe that means we're ready for our next speaker. Come on up. Let us know who you are if you're willing.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Lisa Garcia Duque, and I work in the DEBS CalWorks department, and I'm a member of the SEIU 521 team. As an employment counselor who works in Santa Clara County in our DEBS Gilroy office, it's important to speak about our story to the ones who finalize and make decisions regarding our communities, our livelihood, and overall, our well-being as employees. We live in one of the most expensive counties in the state, and still, we find it challenging to balance work and family life. One way we can do this is by ensuring we have flexibility in our work schedules, allowing us to provide the quality of services we believe in. So I'm here today asking for the Board of Supervisors to consider allowing us a flexible work schedule. This will allow us to incorporate and manage our caseloads more effectively and providing supportive services through CalWorks 2.0. It's important for us because we balance high-priced childcare, spend a significant amount of time commuting to work because the majority of us have to live outside the county due to a lack of affordable housing. I'm asking the board today to take the lead to create a better workplace, culture that supports its employees, so we can do the work supporting our residents. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Welcome.
Good afternoon, supervisors, executives, counselors, members of the public, and county employees. My name is Michael O'Connor. I work for the Public Guardian's Office in Santa Clara County, and I'm also a member of SEIU 521. So I'm here to just talk about some of our experience. A signature is pretty much the most important mark I can make on a piece of paper nowadays, arguably. This is a paper time card. This is something I fill out every 2 weeks. I fill it out, and I'm required to turn it in 4 days before the actual time worked. So I have to attest to my time 4 days prior to actually having that time worked. I've tried this in other jobs and it just hasn't worked. This is the only place where I've experienced it. June 30th, 1953, a company by the name of NCR created this incredible invention to eliminate carbon. This is NCR paper. This is still in use in my department right now. This is the backbone of our inventory system where we catalog tens of millions of dollars of clients' assets. Everything comes to this. And I can't leave this one here because I have to turn this one in. There's also this paper, they're all being used right now in the Silicon Valley. So I can only express what I'm trying to say in an analogy. If a guardian of a ward is going to buy a car for that ward, and a salesperson says, hey, here's a great new paint job. Here's a brand new dashboard. Here's all the control at your fingertips. I always recommend that guardian look under the hood. Find out if there's any old parts or parts of dubious legality inside that engine. Also, if that salesman says it runs on the cheapest gas, or you don't have to change the oil for another year, that's kind of a warning that maybe that engine needs a little bit of care. And that engine, once you drive it off the lot, just might stop working. So I don't know if anyone has any questions about that analogy. I'd love to go through it offline, but I wish you all a wonderful day, and thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you very much. Let me welcome our next speaker up.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Eli Zegas. I'm the Food and Agriculture Policy Director at SPUR.
And before you go forward, Madam Clerk, I'm having just a little bit of trouble with the volume, so if you can give us just a little bit more, that would be great. Thank you.
Sure. Oh, wow. So I'm here today to talk about something I didn't see on the agenda, which is a recommendation that came out of the Ag Preservation Task Force. Santa Clara County has about 12,000 acres that are at risk. And to preserve the future of agriculture in the county, one of the top recommendations that you all discussed when the Ag Task Force presented its recommendation was a long-term funding source for acquisition of conservation easements or purchase of land. And would just like to encourage you all to think about that during the budget process now, but especially going forward. There was discussion earlier this year about the reserve, what was left over in the fund balance, maybe a one-time dedication of funds. So I don't know if that's on the agenda still, but that could be under consideration. But more so, I'm here to ask that you keep this as a priority going forward, thinking about what mechanisms there might be in the budget or otherwise to find a long-term stable funding source. The task force identified that it would take about $20 million a year over 25 years. So this is not one enormous grant of funds that's needed, but over time. And that you all, with your staff and the task force and others, look into what those sources could be in the coming year, because we don't want to have this drop off the radar. It was probably the top priority recommendation from the task force. Without the land, we won't have agriculture. So please keep that on your radar, and good luck with the budget.
Thank you very much. And I have one more card, colleagues, from, I believe it's Mary James or Jamie. Welcome.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Mary James. I work for Santa Clara County Health and Hospital. I'm in the PBS Patient Business Department. I'm just here to let you guys know that there's a lot of the people at my work that are concerned with the amount of time that we're putting in. You guys are spending money accumulating new hospitals, expecting us to work harder to take care of these facilities, yet there's nothing to compensate us for. I understand, listening to everybody talking, that the budget is in crisis because you guys have things we need to take care of. To eliminate that, we have suggested that maybe you start a pilot unit, having some of us work from home, like some of the coders and the RCAs. Sorry. I have one member that wrote, Dear Board of Supervisors, thank you for your time. I'm here on behalf of my coworkers. We deeply care for the community we work for and want to do good work for our community. How can we do this if us ourselves are struggling? Some of our employees are living in their cars because they can't afford to buy homes or live here. Some people are moving out of the area and traveling long distance. I have one coworker that travels all the way from Antigua to come here to work. We have people moving to Hollister because that's a cheaper place to live and buy houses. If we're not making $55,000 minimum, we can't buy a house here in the county, but you want us to work here in the county. I myself have been struggling to make ends meet to continue working for the county. In 2008, I went to school so I could do this job. Now I'm looking at, I'm going to have to move out of the area because there's no money for us to stay living here. I understand that there's budgets and everybody needs to get paid, but that's why we ask if you let some of us work from home, that takes away from some of your overhead costs like the buildings, janitorial costs, electrical costs, office supplies. All those add up. So if you were to allow some of us to work from home, then that could cut your cost too, and then we could take that money and put it elsewhere where it could be better used. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I'm going to confirm with the clerk that that's the last of our speakers for public comment. It appears to be the case. So, colleagues, that takes us to the next item on our agenda, which is item 21, Children, Seniors, and Families Committee. We have three subtopics there for review. We'll use the same process we've used in prior meetings, which is we'll ask the chair of the committee if he or she, in this case she, has some initial comments she'd like to offer. Then we'll go to Mr. Aturia for the formal presentation. We'll go through each of the A, B, and C items one at a time and make sure that we've got all comments or questions before we go on to the next. So, Supervisor Chavez, I'm going to turn to you, see if you've got anything you want to share before I turn to Mr. Ituria.
Thank you. I want to just take a moment to appreciate the employees who work countywide, and I think the folks who came and just spoke just remind us that we're both always wearing our hats as employers and also service providers. So thank you for coming and speaking, and particularly the folks who work in the areas that we're going to talk about today. Their work is very difficult, and we have everything from eligibility workers to social workers to the custodial staff that bless you that keep us all together. The innovators who are creating new programs and the folks who are really trying to crunch the numbers. And what I would say to my colleagues is that I think that they have done a really good job for many, many years of really trying to live within a budget in an area that we keep wanting them to do more programming. One big area that I hope my colleagues think about as you're listening to the budget today is the opportunities countywide, but in particular in these areas, to continue to try to focus us on prevention and really thinking about how we keep young people and families from getting into our systems and the kinds of supports we can provide to really do a better job of helping people be more resilient. And so I'm looking forward to the budget and to hearing from the staff today. And thank you for all your good work.
Thank you, Supervisor. Mr. Ituria, how'd you like to begin? Oops, excuse me.
Jump in first.
Please, Dr. Smith.
I forgot to ask you before the meeting, I think the board received a letter from Supervisor Ellenberg about some of her concerns that she was unable to demonstrate today because she has to be at another location. Did you want to read those into the record, or did we just want to?
I am looking at my colleagues, all of whom are looking perplexed because I think none of us have the document that you're referring to. I see some staff members who are shaking their heads. So why don't we do this, if we may? Why don't we ask, I'm going to ask my staff to reach out to Supervisor Ellenberg's staff and see if we can find out if there is such a document. And
Well, I have a copy of it. I'll print it.
all right.
I'll print
I'm going
it
to ask
for
my
you.
staff to check out the situation with the supervisor just as well to make sure that whatever we've got is current and complete. I'm guessing that it is, but I want to, out of deference to our colleagues, want to make sure that that's the case. And why don't we ask, if we could, Dr. Smith, for Mr. Ituria to go through the Children's, Seniors, and Families budget first with us, and then we'll take stock of where we are and make sure that Supervisor Ellenberg's comments, if any, get read into the record. Okay?
Sure.
Colleagues, thank you. Mr. Ituria, go right ahead.
Okay, thank you. Greg Ituria, County Budget Director. Good afternoon, President Smitty and members of the board. The first budget that we're going to present is the recommended budget for the Department of Child Support Services. The recommended appropriation for the Department of Child Support Services totals to $37.4 million. It does include balancing adjustments within the department's budget, so that way they continue to stay aligned with state allocations, and the department has done a heroic job in doing so, knowing that they've had flat funding from the state for, I believe, close to a decade, and if not more. And so at this point, I see that the director is here if we have any questions from board members of staff.
All right, thank you very much. I want to welcome the staff who are here. If you just introduce yourself, and let me see if we have any comments or questions from members of the board. We may or may not.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Ignacio Guerrero, Director for the Department of Child Support Services, and to my left, Regina Martin, our Deputy Director.
Thank you both for being with us. Colleagues, comments or questions? If not, then we'll say thank you very much. We'll move on to the next item. We will indicate for the record that item 21A has been received and reviewed, and we'll say thank you again to the two staff members who are here. You got away easy today, so thank you for being here. That takes us to 21B, in-home supportive services. Mr. Ituria, we turn to you again.
Yes, the recommended budget for the in-home support services budget is $215.9 million, and the recommendation maintains the current level services and current level budget through next fiscal year. And at that point, I see that we have our agency director and department head available if we have questions from the board regarding the IHSS budget.
Thank you. Gentlemen, if you'd introduce yourselves just for the record.
Good afternoon, Jim Ramoni, Director of the Department of Aging and Adult Services.
Good afternoon, Bob Minicucci, Director of the Social Services Agency.
All right, thank you. Colleagues, any comments or questions? I see Supervisor Chavez has her light on.
Thank you. A couple of things that I just wanted to follow up on, and one is that I know there was a request for clerical staff to support the IHSS body of work, and I am interested in what you think the clerical staff needs are here, and you're thinking about the additions that are being recommended relative to the clerical staff. I almost want to say shortage, but I'm not sure I'm right about that.
For clarification, Supervisor, this budget unit deals directly with the wages and benefits to the IHSS providers. The actual program is included in the next budget item, which is the social services. I can speak to that issue.
Yeah,
this
thank
issue
you
now.
very much.
Sure. So there has been, over the course of the last few years within the IHSS program, as we've made augmentations to social work staffing, we have not been commensurate with clerical staffing. That has been an issue that has been raised specifically by our IHSS Public Authority Advisory Board, and we're well aware of that also. What we've been involved in for the last year is a significant effort internally with the agency's CQI, or Continuous Quality Improvement Manager, who is currently doing an efficiency study of our clerical processes. We've also been involved in a unit-based team project that's shortened the wait time of our telephone call into the IHSS program, in which we've now implemented a voicemail system where callers, instead of having to wait for a significant period of time in calling the program, actually can leave a voicemail. Those voicemails are now being responded to within a 24-hour period, and we don't have anywhere the significant wait time that was an issue and raised a lot of issues previously for the advisory board. We're still in the midst of working with our CQI manager regarding efficiencies, and at this time we did not feel there was a need in this current year budget to request additional clerical staffing, but last year the county executive did offer us some extra help staffing, which we've utilized to augment clerical staffing, and we can continue to do that.
So let me back up. And I feel like I heard about the efficiency manager or the person doing this work like a year ago. How long has this been going on?
Well, we would have talked about that likely at the IHSS program annual report out that we gave to you in October, and so we did highlight that then. So it's been an ongoing effort since.
But when is it going to be done?
I believe, and I've been working with with this manager directly, as well as our chief deputy director, and we've got a meeting scheduled for later this month in which we'll be talking more about the status of it. It has been an ongoing process because in addition to the clerical staffing needs, he's also been looking at our intake application process, and so he's kind of worked both of these together. One of the things that I hope I can impress upon you is that we do not feel that we have a critical mass issue with respect to clerical inefficiencies at this time, and that's one of the things that if we did, we would be requesting additional clerical staffing.
So Jim, so that's helpful. I guess how long have we had the CQI person working on this area?
During this fiscal year. So
it's been a whole year?
Yes.
Okay. And do we have a report from the person or their list of recommendations?
Not yet, no.
All right. And does the person work for us or is it a consultant?
He's an agency staff member, yes.
Okay. So given that it's been a year, what I would really like to get is, before we take a final vote on the budget, is at least the observations of what's been done to date or what the recommendations have been to date. That would be helpful. And I understand the point you're raising, which is, I hear two things. One is if it had been an emergency, you would have asked for more. You're using extra help to deal with what is so we have extra help in the budget last year, extra help in the budget this year to deal with whatever that shortage is.
Additional clerical staffing, yes.
Okay, so again, I'm going to say just 2 budget cycles. That's going to make me think that there's an ongoing longer term issue. So I really want to better understand that. And then the last thing that I recognize what you're saying is that some of this body of work will be ongoing because it's going to be a little iterative with new technology and the like. So I appreciate that point. And then just to make sure I understand one other point that you raised is the advisory board. Well, let me back. This group of folks, I just wanted to give you a compliment. You had some of your staff at a meeting trying to encourage the IHSS workers to learn how to go online and do both time cards and direct deposit and all of that. And they raised some concerns, the patients have raised some concerns about their ability to, depending on their capabilities to be able to do that. But it does sound like your staff's had some really good success in moving people to more paperless activities. Do you feel like that's accurate?
I feel that that's accurate, and that's actually the direction that the state is taking the program statewide. There's electronic visit verification that's coming down the pike, in which there will be more electronic requests from the state to the IHSS population, both providers and recipients. And yes, IHSS time cards can now be done completely online, and that reduces paper, it reduces mail time, it reduces cost for mailing. For those individuals that participate in that and have learned how to do the system, it works very, very well. And there's nothing like what we saw years ago when we were relying on paper to handle the IHSS
And Jim,
payroll.
what's the percentage of people who are using it online? Do you know?
Approximately 20% statewide. I don't know the specific breakdown for our county.
I'd
but
be
I can-
interested, I mean,
Sure.
really, your staff, I thought they did a really good job of explaining it and answered people's questions really well. I was surprised at how many people are old-fashioned like me and still like paper and still knew what a check was, for example. So, all right, thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Colleagues, any other comments or questions? If not, and mindful of the fact that we will get back to the request for information from Supervisor Ellenberg briefly, we will go on, we will indicate for the record that 21B has been received and reviewed by the board, and we will go now to 21C, Social Services Agency, and I'll go to you, Mr. Aturia.
Thank you. The recommended budget for the Social Services Agency is $792 million. It includes recommended actions to add resources to enhance the in-home support services, reassessment services, to strengthen the support bureau within the Department of Family and Children's Services, to implement the Learn, Earn, and Progress program, to transfer the Office of Veteran Services Division from the CEO to the SSA, as well as adding resources to enhance contract services to support the Department of Family and Children's Services, to support foster employee engagement, services for low-income families, immigration and civil legal services to minors and low-income families, to support the integrity of public assistance programs and protect public welfare funds, as well as resources for training of managers and supervisors, and to support the adult daycare programs for older adults and adults with disabilities. And again, I see that we have the Agency Director Menakachi here to help with any questions from the board.
Thank you. Gentlemen, I'm not going to ask you to reintroduce yourselves, but I will ask my board colleagues if they have questions. Supervisor Wasserman, no. Supervisor Chavez.
Thank you. So first of all, we do have Supervisor Ellenberg's list, and some of them were on my list, so it's good to, I'm glad that got introduced. Just a couple of very broad questions. I thought, Bob, if you wouldn't mind, just take a minute to talk a little bit about the work that the agency is addressing relative to prevention and some of the kind of the broad concepts of the leadership that you all are taking in that area.
It's our pleasure to speak to that. So what we recognize in a lot of the work that we do, and part of the impetus for the county engaging in the Title IV waiver, was to take a different look at approach in terms of how we're able to do our work. In many of our programs, it's about coming to the aid of folks once there is a crisis that they're facing. And with the undertaking the work of the 4E waiver, we were finally able to be in a situation where we are able to use funding, which typically comes with some pretty heavy restrictions as to what exact activities you can fund with them, and have more freedom and flexibility to experiment in that. Our waiver for the county will be ending soon, and it will be replaced with the new federal legislation around the Families First Prevention Services Act. And with that, it's prompted and allowed us to have conversations around how to move a lot of our systems upstream. Child welfare in particular, we know, has faced a lot of kind of intractable issues. And what we realize is, through trying to put a trauma-informed lens on the work that we do, it's very, very deep and arduous, heavy lift to correct course once significant trauma has happened in people's lives. So what we're trying to do with our funding flexibility that we see coming is to engage and begin conversations around how to move our systems upstream, but also how to better coordinate our care across the health system, across our education system, and beginning the conversations of how to formulate those strategic alliances amongst ourselves as government entities, but also how to more deeply engage with our community and have those important conversations around how we can really meet community needs through consumer and community voice.
I think that's really very exciting work, and I think it's going to impact the entire county. So thank you for that. A couple of issues I just wanted to raise, both with Dr. Smith, but also just for my colleagues, that are issues that I think are pending that the budget hasn't entirely been able to address yet. And one of them is that the changes that are happening at the state level relative to foster youth, to me, is just one really big hole in the donut, so to speak. And in particular, I had a chance to visit with a couple of the foster youth that we needed to change their services through the merger of Unity Care and Seneca. But as part of that discussion, just what we're doing relative to congregate care versus individual care. And it seems to me like one of the areas we're going to have to be able to pivot to relatively quickly is an expansion of our resource families. Something I talked to Chief Garnett about a couple days ago as well. Where are we in the process of evaluating that, and what, from a needs perspective, I don't know if we actually have a handle on the exact number of children we think we're going to need to support this way, and if you know the answer to that.
Sure. The Continuum of Care Reform Act is something that I think is attempting to do some of the right things that need to happen. We know that the congregate care system as it existed wasn't necessarily meeting the needs of folks, of our children. And frankly, I think we felt that there was a situation where at times folks were being warehoused. What we know through this is that there's a much more substantive effort to deal with addressing the needs of folks and ensuring there's treatment immediately available for children coming into our system. And what we also know is we're learning a lot along the way, and that's part of what we're trying to do to build our assessment. We know that there's some deep-end kids who would be the kids who would be having services handled through our STRTPs. And what we know currently is it's a relatively small number in terms of our system. We are still looking at how we best assess folks and how we get a handle on how cross systems, we use the tools, the cans and things like that to get the best sense of what a child's needs are. What we know currently is that we're probably talking with about 30 to 50 kids that have that deep need. And beyond that, we feel like the rest can really be handled through the existing system. We have an RFA system. It's just about delving in deeper to the recruitment aspect of that. And we feel that'll be a challenge, but at the same time, it's one I think we can meet. And the state, across the state, where there's many different strategies that are coming online to enhance that. What we also know is that there's a need for some pretty intensive supportive services for situations like RFA. And if we're talking about enhancing systems around professional parents and things like that, that's a system that we are just starting to put out some feelers around, getting some feedback as to what the best approaches to that are. But that's all assumed in the system of care. It's really just trying to figure out, as you said, the assessing the needs and where each kid will land.
And so do you feel like within your current budget, and I'm just going to go to the resource families, I have learned more just about the expense for providing support to these children. And it's interesting, we were talking about the dually involved youth in particular and the cost to the public safety and justice side of the system. Do you have the resource in your budget to do a significant expansion of the resource families, both in terms of number but also in terms of payment, or is that something that will have to come back to the board?
We have broad concerns that we have around the funding for the program that we address with the state in the sense of what our allocations are and whether those are appropriate. But beyond that, again, it's the system of care, and what we're talking about is shifting resources from how we used to place kids, through the congregate care system and group homes and such, and refocusing a lot of that energy on that. We still need to get a handle on the exact services, but again, in many instances, they're being provided or were provided through a different medium. So for the most part, I would say yes.
We have the
resources.
resources. What I am concerned that we may not have the resources for, and you should tell me if you think we do, because I didn't know whether or not it made sense for us to bring this forward as a referral or as a budget augmentation. Part of my interest is just making sure we do it right, so I don't want to be driven by a deadline where we may need to do a little more research. But one of the things that's become really clear to me is that it's just so expensive to have a home here and to have one of two parents not working if their job is a resource family. I don't know how that happens in our current structure.
Right. I mean, I think the challenge there is, again, that's a state conversation around what the funding resources are. If we find that in a situation where we might have thought we were going to be using the STRTPs and aren't because there's a different approach that we can take, that's the assessment we're doing now. And at that point, I think we could have those conversations. We're saying, the funding and as a whole is there as part of our allocation. It's just how we allocate it out.
So are you saying you need more flexibility with the fund?
I would say potentially that might be the case, and that's the conversation we're working with the state.
So what's the timeline for at least taking our next giant step in that area?
I would say in terms of procuring some of the things that we feel we need, like around professional parents, we would be doing that in the next couple months. In terms of the conversations with the state, as we mentioned before, the challenge there is we're still waiting on appointments for some of the key positions there to set the policy direction.
So I think what I would just suggest on that is that if you could off agenda just list out where we think what resources we're talking about shifting around, and mostly because I want to understand if we're going to need help from, for example, from our housing department to supplement some of this or not. I would just want to be able to understand that. Thank you. And then just two other areas that I'd like to be able to talk about. One is on the senior nutrition. I can't recall if the senior nutrition programs are fully funded right now or not.
There's, there's a variety of funding sources that go towards the senior nutrition program, but right now, with our congregate meals program, where we have 40 sites, we got an augmentation from several months ago through board action, and we'll be presenting information about living wage at next Tuesday's meeting. But right now, we consider ourselves fully funded.
And then living wage would be whether or not we need to add additional funding for these particular for our service providers.
For our nonprofit congregate sites.
And is the full funding, is our assessment of full funding, did we do a survey and we know the actions we took are full funded and the deficit and the delta really is in this living wage bucket?
Right, and at the same time, the county does provide a significant portion of the funding in addition to Older Americans Act funding that we receive through SourceWise, as well as contributions and other funding sources. But our county does provide a significant amount of funding to make the senior nutrition program.
Right. The question I was asking is, have we done an assessment and understand that the actions we took have filled that delta? Because the reason people were coming to us is that frankly, there was a delta, and either programs were running at a deficit or they were grabbing money from other parts of their senior programming. So I'm just wondering, have we done some sort of assessment that we know that, or are we in the process of doing that?
We have done that. We presented that information last September, and then you finalized it at a board meeting in April.
Is that the board meeting that I was asking for more information on? So, okay, so the answer to my question is,
we'll be coming back on Tuesday with additional.
No, I get it. I guess I understand that. Mike, I have asked this question. You've answered it already, and we just didn't have an agreement about that. So I get that. Thank you for reminding me of that. And then my last issue I just wanted to raise is that I'm really excited about the work we're doing both in foster care and with child care. And as it relates to the child care issue, both Supervisor Ellenberg and I were made aware that the county Office of Education is looking at developing their own resource and referral program. And it's something I had been really interested in us doing too. And so as part of the budget discussions, I just want to make sure Bob, that someone on your team has a chance to talk to Dr. Dewan so that we understand what they're doing. And again, if there's some portion, some role we can play, if, you know, if they have a, anyway, I think that would be of value, unless you've already done that with her.
We have, and as the child care conversations have taken place, we've talked with them all along the way.
So are we interested, because we've raised this issue at the board to have a resource and referral of our own. I'd never had anybody say, well, we could partner with the County Office of Ed. Is that something?
I think when the conversation came of like the roles and responsibilities is that we mentioned, you know, existing providers, number one. The number two in that equation is always the County Office of Ed. And I think at that point we mentioned that and talked through their interest and where they were in that.
So where's our interest in working with them based on that?
So as we said, with, you know, as it stands in the current state structure, with childcare being with education, that's the pecking order. So we're always down below that, and that was always the issue we had with it.
Right. So do we want to more formally partner with the County Office of Education and support that effort? And if so, what does that look like?
So I think that's an easier and more effective way to get there, is to partner with them.
Okay.
And have them take on that lead role, because education will more readily talk with education.
Okay. So what does that mean in terms of our efforts? Do you want us to, are you formally partnering with them already? Do we need to take an action to do that? Do you think that from talking to them, they seemed unaware that we were looking at it. So I just spoke to Dr. Dewan the other day. So I'm not sure if that may create an opportunity for us to piggyback with them, or if that's something you want to talk to her about.
I think we'll have to talk to them and get back to the full board with more information, because I don't think we have the full picture of what they're planning on doing and how we could coordinate with them if we did. So.
Okay, that makes sense. That would be great. And then the only, as part of that, I just wanted to highlight again my excitement about the work that you're all doing with foster care. And I think as it relates to prevention, I'm very interested in us taking a look at how we can really use the CAN Center as kind of our first kind of preventative act. And so, or prevention partnership, maybe even with our nonprofits, and wanted just to highlight that I hope that's the first thing that's coming up.
Yep.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we let folks step away, we do have two cards now from people who'd like to speak, Gail Osmer and Tyler Taylor, and we'll ask the two of them to come on up, and we have set aside up to 2 minutes for their comments if they would like to make their comments at this time. And then at that point, colleagues, I will share the communication we have from Supervisor Ellenberg, and we'll find a way to incorporate that into the record working with our clerk. And we're going to go to the microphone right there in the center. And it's the invisible microphone, not the one on that's truly. It's not on that side, it's on that side. So if you'll step to the podium, there you go.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
My name is Tyler Taylor. I serve on the County Senior Care Commission. And I'm here about the adult daycare subsidy pilot. We got a chance to look at the budget, and we just had a concern about the one-time funding that was in the language there. We originally designed this as a 3-year program, and so we're very appreciative of the $772,000 that was allocated, but we wanted to make sure that the program could actually be sought through to fruition, and that we'd have some viable results to present back to the county. And so we were just kind of wanting to know whether this was going to be something that would be funded into the future, or is it just really slated for a one-time funding?
All right, thank you. I'm going to follow up on your question with our county executive in just a moment. But why don't we go ahead and hear from Ms. Osmer as well, and then I'll follow that up with a question, as I say, and see if other colleagues have.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Thank you so much. My name is Gail Osmer, and I'm the chairperson of the Santa Clara County Senior Care Commission. excuse me. As you all are aware of, Santa Clara County is an age-friendly county. And one of the issues I'd like to address as an age-friendly county, there's 8 domains. And one of the domains that will be very important regarding this ADS study is social participation. And this will focus on many issues for seniors that are isolated seniors. And a lot of the isolated seniors are more, as you know, more at risk of falling, more hospital stays, and increased health problems. The ADS study will also improve more seniors' quality of life and socialization. So we hope we will get the full funding. And thank you for all your help for looking at this, and hopefully you will support the age-friendly or ADS study. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Smith, we got a question and or a comment about the funding plans for the senior daycare program and 1 year versus 3 years. And my recollection is this has something to do with the staff's characterization of this as a pilot program and how you roll out a pilot program, but my recollection may be wrong, so I don't know.
Correct. That's
okay.
it.
Do you want to
So-
talk a little bit more about that and pull on your staff if that's helpful as well?
Well, since we forced it upon them, I'll talk about it.
All right.
Basically, this is a program that the county has never done before and that we think is a good idea, but we're not sure that we're going to be successful with it in the long run. So we're recommending that since we approve budgets on an annual basis, that we approve this as a pilot project for 1 year. That'll give us time to assess success over that year and then reconsider it at next budget for ongoing repetitive funding.
Got it. Colleagues, follow-up questions, comments? Okay. So just on this item, just to be clear, the thinking is, I mean, I gather that the comment from the member of the public was that they were hoping they could roll this out over a 3-year period to provide some meaningful assessment over a longer period of time about whether or not the pilot was successful, thinking pilot meaning over a period of 3 years. Staff saying, well, maybe, but let's try it the first year first and see whether or not it has at least enough success to then continue on a pilot basis in years 2 and 3.
Correct.
I'm just at this point, I'm just trying to sort out what the contours of the conversation are. Ms.
So is this so this will be its first year, or did it just have a year? I kind of can't remember. Did it start already? No.
No,
okay.
this is the first year.
The reason that you may be perplexed is I did an inventory item a few years ago for the Saratoga community with matching funds from the city of Saratoga. So they have had a senior daycare program that I think has performed well. And now we've got other senior centers around the county who are looking to provide the same kinds of services. That's a broad generalization because different programs are different. And I, for the record, think that's a good thing. It also sometimes gets a little confusing as well because senior daycare is not a healthcare program. It is simply a senior daycare program that allows for opportunities for folks to remain in their homes and have socialization opportunities during the day. That is somewhat different and obviously less costly than a senior healthcare program, senior day healthcare program, which involves the additional incremental costs of healthcare services as part and parcel of the program. So I'm going to ask folks to hold off for a minute. Dr. Smith, am I describing all this right? Please feel free to clarify or correct.
No, you got it right.
Okay. So then I'm going to Ms. Osmer, if there's really something that needs to be clarified or corrected, I'll accommodate it, but not if it's just a second bite at the apple, please. Mr. Taylor?
Yes, thank you. The reason why we're asking for the clarification on the 1 year is because in this model, we have to onboard an administrator role. And so there's a significant amount of time that it'll take to develop the RFP, go out to RFP, analyze the proposals, get the person onboarded, and then start the actual pilot where we can start to gather the information. So if within the first year we're not able to do that, we wanted a little extra time. And that's what we wanted to say. Thank you.
That will be dealt with as a rollover. So if the money's not spent in this fiscal year, we just roll it over into the next year.
I think for the two speakers who are here on this topic, it is probably helpful to just be mindful of the fact that we budget on an annual basis. So 1 year budget is a 1 year budget. That being said, Dr. Smith, I'm hearing you say that there's nothing about the fact that it's 1 year that precludes us from indicating that we anticipate that if adequate progress is made during year 1, that there will in fact be a year 2 and 3 to the pilot, but that's an assessment we want to make at a later date. Right. And also that funds could be rolled over if they're not fully utilized during the first year. Am I right on both counts?
Correct.
All right. I'm going to call that agreement and say thank you very much. And then we do have, colleagues, a letter, 2.5 pages from our colleague Supervisor Ellenberg, who could not be with us today. She has asked that we simply ask the clerk to incorporate the letter by reference into today's proceedings. If there's a way to formally attach the letter, please do. We all have received it. I'm going to ask that if copies have been made, if we could put a few at the back for anyone who would like a copy. And there are a number of questions, many of them regarding social services, IHSS, Department of Family and Children's Services budget request, and those are questions that I understand, Dr. Smith, you're going to be able to have your staff respond to in writing subsequent to today's meeting. And we'll all get copies of the responses so that it's public, yeah?
Right. We will respond, and I'm sorry that the board didn't get it earlier. It was addressed to the board and the president, and I just presumed you had gotten it.
No worries at all. Duly noted. And again, we look forward to getting those questions answered and then the answers shared as well, so that all 5 members of the board have the answers to Supervisor Ellenberg's questions as part of the deliberative process for the June budget. All right. Thank you. Colleagues, unless there are any other comments or questions, I'm going to say that we have completed item 21, items A, B, and C. Last call. We're good to go. All right. Thank you. And thank you again to the members of the public who were here. Thank you to the staff who were here to present. Takes us to item 22, Housing, Land Use, Environment, and Transportation Committee. I'll turn to Mr. Wasserman and see if he has any initial comments to share framing this conversation. Then we'll go to Mr. Ituria, and then we'll march through items A through G in order.
Thank you, President Simidian, and thank you for being the vice chair on Hewlett that I'm honored to chair once again. I'm just going to thank all the departments that are involved in Hewlett. I think it's a real basket full of different departments, different issues, planning and development that deals with things such as Stanford and the mosque and code enforcement and people's leach fields and planning and building that goes on all throughout the unincorporated area, both big and small. SEPA with Joe and all that happens there environmentally, and with the Animal Service Center that's coming, for anybody that doesn't know that's coming. And roads and airports, Harry and Eric and the job they do there, and the ongoing issues that come up with airports, both big and small. The Parks and Recreation Department with Don Rocha at the helm there for our 28 parks and all our trails and the waters. So I look at Hewlett and I think of, Joe, I kind of think of Hewlett like I think of SEPA, where it's a whole bunch of things that had no other place to go, and we put them all into that one thing. So I want to say thank you all for your involvement and the great job you do for the county and the residents as part of the Hewlett Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ituria, you want to tee these up?
Yes. The first budget under the Hewlett departments that report to Hewlett is planning and development. And the recommended budget for the planning and development budget is $21.3 million. It includes recommended actions to add resources to enhance financial support, planning services, and code enforcement services, as well as legal consulting services. And I see the director is here to help with any questions the board may have.
Thank you. Before we go to staff for additional comments or questions or go to the board, we do have just one speaker who would like to address the board under item 22, and that's Mark Landgraf. And so if he would like to step on up and offer his comments, we've set aside up to 2 minutes for speakers on this item, and welcome you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Supervisors. Mark Landgraf, External Affairs Manager with the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority. Agricultural operations in Santa Clara Valley provide a host of services to our communities and the region, some of which are obvious, providing important local food sources, but many of which are often overlooked. Of course, providing food is very important for our daily lives, and ideally those sources of produce make better sense climate-wise, being local than distant sources. But as well, our farms provide many ecosystem services that benefit our communities, like absorbing and spreading rainfall during heavy storms, providing places for wildlife to roam along edges of fields, and stopping sprawl and the associated greenhouse gas emissions when agricultural lands are preserved at our urban edges. The Santa Clara Valley Ag Plan, among many recommendations, and as highlighted by the county's Ag Task Force, did include an important recommendation to preserve 12,000 acres of our highest priority ag lands through an ag conservation easement program. And this would require a dedicated local source of funds for protection of those lands. The Open Space Authority is grateful for Supervisor's support of the Ag Plan and efforts to identify a local funding source. Our agency stands ready to partner with the Santa Clara County on these and any follow-on efforts for this critical element to implement the Santa Clara Valley Ag Plan. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. All right. Let me turn to staff, ask you to introduce yourselves just for the record, if you would, please.
Jacqueline Anshano, Director of Planning and Development, and with me is Bama Ashok, our Financial Officer.
Thank you both for being with us. I see your light is still on. Not. All right. So we are at A, Department of Planning and Development. Yes, Mr. Aturia?
Correct.
All right. Let me ask one more time if we have any comments or questions under A. We do not. Then I think we do. Now we do. Forgive me. That's why I was trying to clarify where we were. I thought it was surprising that there weren't any.
I misunderstood. I thought
yeah,
I was kind of waiting for the overview to get over with and move into this section, but we're here, so thank you. First of all, let me thank you for your ongoing work with our office, over the recent past, and looking forward to continue to work with you, Jacqueline, going forward, and the rest of your team, as we have in the past. I think Supervisor Wasserman points it out quite often that our two districts seem to have at least the largest expanse of land use issues, which is a blessing and a curse. A lot to do, a lot to keep up with, lots of constituent calls, but we appreciate all your support with all of that at all times. And that said, this is a larger issue, and I imagine it's, as some of my questions tend to be, it's just as much an issue, question for the county executive as it is for the Department of Planning and Development. It's an issue that a couple of speakers have spoken to already today, and that is trying to meet the aspirations and the outcomes of the Ag Task Force. I know the Board of Supervisors showed some preference to some kind of a fund balance formula that would provide one-time money from time to time, with some hope that would happen this year. And the speakers who have spoken today have talked about thoughts regarding the need for some kind of set aside or revenue measure eventually to come up with the money for the extrapolations that the planning department did for us, which I don't think anybody contests, whether it's $20 million a year over 25 years or $30 million a year over a lesser period of time. The issue is that there's 12,000 acres out there that much of which is ready to negotiate into easements if we only had a bucket of money to begin buying up some of those easements on a regular basis. So I guess I just want to get clear on where we are as we move into the final stages of this budget cycle, and where we would find any reference in this budget to that initiative. Dr. Smith, are we still committed, or Greg, to coming back to the board and talking about fund balance being a source for ag preservation this year?
Yeah, for this year, the recommended use of the fund balance that we anticipate to be available at the end of this fiscal year was needed in order to fund some key capital projects that coincidentally are coming online next fiscal year: the Animal Services Shelter, the Vietnamese American Service Center, and the emergency room expansion. Those are just happen to be three very large, coming at the same time, so that the timing didn't line up very well for this fiscal year. There wasn't enough anticipated fund balance for those things. That doesn't mean maybe in a different fiscal year there might be more flexibility. The math part for that was difficult this year.
I think I'll add to that we understand the board's priority to find funding, and there was the commitment to use any fund balance that was available at this point. As we were developing the recommended budget, fund balance was very tight. We are hoping that in June things might loosen up, but as the board approves the budget, certainly they can consider utilization of reserves if they would like for this kind of purpose or other purposes. But given the fact that we had a very tight budget, we didn't feel that we could responsibly come up with $20 million.
Okay, so as I understand it, no $20 million earmarked in the budget from a fund balance standpoint, but as we finalize our deliberations in June, that would leave any board preference to utilization of reserves,
right,
or other identified dollars on a one-time basis for this purpose.
Right.
I'm just trying to do active listening to make sure I'm hearing where you're coming from. The planning department, and again, Dr. Smith or Anciano, has been very clear as to what they feel the options are for a longer-term source of funding. Most of them would involve a ballot measure. Doesn't need to be up for discussion today, nor is today an action meeting anyway. But what I'm interested in making sure I understand is what the timelines would be for that. And I suppose that's a question for the administration. Not that we don't deal with election cycles all the time, but we have a March primary this year. We have, again, the November presidential election. And should there either be a referendum process pushed forward by the community itself, or a more classic 4/5 vote by the board, up or down on putting something on the ballot, when would that need to occur by? And I understand there may be different dates for both of those. And I'll add, if it's better to get that, to just ask for a report to come back to us off agenda on those timelines, that would be fine, as long as we have them in plenty of time to continue the discussion generally in June.
Maybe I can put the dates off to the side a little bit and just express from an administrative perspective the issue of a stable funding source in the amount needed to actually have an agricultural easement program really requires, as we've said before, some additional resources other than what's currently available in the general fund, because this is an expensive program, and in order to put together sufficient amount of money to actually buy a significant piece of land, the easement off of a significant piece of land, you're talking about many tens of millions of dollars, which we can't reliably say are going to be available in the general fund. As a matter of fact, based on our introduction on Monday, we know that there's going to be a downturn in the economy, and sadly, I think in the next 2 years, the board is going to have to wrestle with decreasing expenditures rather than increasing them. So I would strongly encourage the board, if this is a high priority and we want to do it in the right way and actually be able to make an impact, that additional funding from another source is required. In terms of the exact dates, it obviously depends on which ballot you would like to be on, if you wanted an issue on the ballot. And we are past the time for getting anything on a ballot in November of 19, but if we were going for March or November of 20, County Council is going to tell me what the dates are.
I don't know the dates off the top of my head, but we can give the dates to the board, but we definitely still have time for the March or November 2020 elections.
Yeah,
It's usually, I think, somewhere in the region of 120 days, but I don't know exactly.
Yeah, I think it's important for us to have those so that we're having an open and transparent discussion at some point. I don't think we want to be in a position, given the interest that's out there and the work that we've done to tee this issue up, to just have statutory deadlines pass by and have to tell people we didn't have that discussion. We didn't create an opportunity here at the Board of Supervisors for them to come in and make their petitions heard, like we've heard a couple of people today. And I do believe the other issue with that is that whatever the timing would need to be for a referendum, I'm hearing that there's tremendous interest in that out there in the world of open space advocates and others. So whether the county, and one of the, of course, the model for doing that work is the Park Trust Fund right now, which is not a revenue measure, it's a set aside. And yeah, that does crimp the general fund budget by whatever the set aside amount is every year. So it's something to be mindful of. It may be better, I think, for us to evaluate what the revenue possibilities are as a county rather than have a referendum go forward that I believe is sure to pass based on polling that I've seen at a 50% plus one to force a mandatory set aside, because that's all it takes to set aside current general fund dollars by charter amendment. So I just think we need to be on that, aware of what's going on, make sure we're understanding what the deadlines are, make sure people aren't out there separate and apart from the county, making decisions and having invested in petition circulators and things like that to essentially put something on the ballot that is one of our lesser options from a board standpoint or administrative standpoint. So really all I'm asking for is that we stay on this issue very closely during the course of the year.
Might I suggest to the board that you ask us to come back in June with a more detailed report on what it would take?
That would be great. I think that's a more concise way of requesting what I was trying to request. Thank you, Dr. Smith. I should say, Mr. President and the Planning Director, that's all the questions or concerns I have at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wasserman.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you for Supervisor Cortese for expressing your thoughts on that. Mine are similar and different. Similar in that I want to help the ag community by finding funding to purchase ag easements over time. I appreciate the work done by the Ag Task Force planning staff on the $20 million a year for 25 years. As I've joked often, we don't know if it's raining next Thursday, so I have no idea what ag easements are going to cost in 10 years or 15 years or 20 years from now. All we can do is estimate. What I do know is that the ag easement program the state conceived, that we participated in, Supervisor Cortese and I served on for 7 months, our community values ag. And as my aide said for me the other day at the Water District, because I wasn't able to attend, if we really value ag, then we need to toss money towards it. The problem with doing that is, as our budget director and our CEO have said repeatedly, our fund, our general fund, is only a certain size. And if you take money from someplace, like I've had in mind for whatever reason, $10 million a year from the county should go to an ag easement fund. And some years that will suffice the farmers that are willing sellers and we willing buyers to buy some acreage. Some years it won't be enough. Some places there'll be 60, 80, 100 acres available. Sometimes there'll be 5 and 10 acres available. Sometimes there'll be money that'll carry over. But if we set aside, in my example, $10 million a year, then the CEO and the county budget director, CBD, I thought there was an O after that maybe, we're going to say, okay, where does that $10 million come from? And that's a real problem. We've got the airport issue going on right now. In our most recent vote on the airport, we said, let's not take federal funding. Well, we've got $10, $20 million in deferred maintenance that need to happen out at our airports. We have ongoing costs that need to happen. If we're not going to take the federal money for the $10 to $20 million, and we're not going to take the federal money on an annual basis, then we're going to have to subsidize it out of the general fund. So there's a lot of different ways, and I appreciate Supervisor Cortese asking our CEO, and our CEO saying he would come back in June with various scenarios on how to fund this. I think there is majority, if not unanimous, support on this board to fund the preservation of agriculture. I think where we differ is how that's to be done, which is not surprising. So I want to go on record as saying I'm in favor of the county putting money into a pot, whether it's money left over of reserves, money left over unspent, as we were talking about a few months ago, money, as Dr. Smith just brought up, utilization of reserves. However we do it, I want us to come back and have that public discussion here and discuss how we can do that. Because I think that's where the support is. It's, as usual, the devil's in the details. I've got a few ideas, and I'm sure each of my peers up here has a few ideas too. Thank you for that time, Mr. President.
Thank you. Anything else on this item before we say planning and development has been received and considered? If not, then I will say planning and development has been received and considered. Thank you very much, Ms. Anshano, and to your staff as well. Thank you. That takes us to Consumer and Environmental Protection Agency. Mr. Ituria?
Yes, the recommended appropriation for the Consumer Environmental Protection Agency budget is $65.1 million, and it includes actions to add resources to improve public outreach, to facilitate regulatory compliance, to adjust inspection resources to accommodate new regulations, to provide public health services for the Hazardous Materials Program, to augment agricultural oversight to address new initiatives, to increase customer service and to meet service demands, and to realign staffing to support required lab resources. And at this point, I see we've got staff from the Consumer Environmental Protection Agency available to assist with questions from the board.
Thank you very much. Let me ask the staff to introduce themselves before we turn to the board.
Sure. Good afternoon. Joe Zintek, Director of the Consumer Environmental Protection Agency. And to my right is Michael Ballier, Director of Department of Environmental Health. And to my left is Joe Davini, the Agriculture Commissioner and the Sealer of Weights and Measures.
Thank you very much. Comments or questions from members of the board? Supervisor Chavez.
Thank you. Thank you all very much for being here. I had just a couple of very broad questions that I wanted to understand. One is that I just wanted to say how much I appreciated Vector Control trying to be creative about what kinds of chemicals we're using to address, mosquitoes and every other thing that you all are trying to do that in a healthy way. And I wanted to say thank you for that. As it relates to another topic, I'm curious about how, if at all, we are engaging in weights and measures relative to cannabis and cannabis shops. And I'm assuming they have weights and measures that they're asking you to weigh and measure. Are we doing that work, or are we not because of the county's moratorium? They're all looking at the attorney. I didn't mean to ask an attorney question. Sorry.
I mean, the issue doesn't have anything to do with the county's zoning ordinance. It's really a question that there have been issues in getting clarity from the state on authority, and our understanding is that some clarity will be forthcoming.
In the next few months, or?
Well, we asked, a year ago now, formally in writing for the state to actually affirm that counties retain this authority. There's a problem with some of the state legislation, but we were recently told that we should expect something soon. I don't know more beyond that, but we've been pushing them to provide regulatory clarity.
Okay, so do you anyone want to add to that, just in terms of timing? Or
The regulatory entities we regulate in that regard are currently in the city of San Jose, and we're also working with the city of San Jose on a path forward to getting that clarity.
Okay, and I know that, well, I have no idea all the regulatory challenges that will face you, so I appreciate that you're being careful about how we proceed. I think that's actually very important. So my intent is not to rush you. It was really just to understand what the environment looks like. On a separate note, I'm curious about, as you are looking at emerging legislation from the state, in particular legislation around home businesses, and this is a conversation I was able to talk to the staff a little bit about offline, but people cooking in their homes and how, I'm not sure where we are with that legislation, and I'm also not sure, based on where we are, whether or not we have the staffing to really support what the state is leaning toward us doing.
Yes, thank you, Michael Ballier. What I can tell you is that, yes, there was a state law that passed, AB 626, became effective January 1, and it is what we call an opt-in bill, which means the county would need to take an affirmative action in order to opt in. Otherwise, it doesn't apply. But there was also a cleanup bill, which is currently going through the state legislature, AB 377, which was intended to help clarify some of the language in the original bill, which had some uncertainty regarding things such as who can actually opt in, as well as how inspections and that kind of thing would actually work. And
Excuse the interruption. I just want to I apologize, Mr. Ballier. Here I am on this point, Supervisor Shows. Just to be clear, the new law took effect January 1 of this year, and there is already cleanup legislation pending.
That's correct.
I think it's sort of important to underscore that in terms of how we go forward, because it's back to you. Forgive me, but
No, that's right. I know this is one of your pet issues. Just hold on, or you're going to get a new placard. So just, I'm just kidding. Yeah. But so the cleanup legislation was, well, let me just ask, the timing of that, does it look like it's going to, did it get signed, or where is it in process?
No, I understand that. I think it's still in one of the appropriations committee at the state, but I understand it's also an urgency provision, and I think last I heard, the goal was they were going to try to get it signed by July.
So, Joe, just to let you know where my thinking is, because I don't want to scare you that I'm just wanting to push the staff, because I'm really not. I think this is an area where we have to be very careful about public health and safety. But what I was curious about, and the reason I was raising it, is that while there is this heightened interest in people doing cooking in their homes, I've been trying to figure out whether or not there's a way the county can provide something between all home-based businesses and what it takes to be in a full-blown restaurant. And so one of the things I mentioned to the staff is that the city and county of San Francisco have invested in a set of kitchens that are in the Mission District, so that individuals who are trying to start home, for lack of a better word, out of a home-based business to be in a more public environment and get the kind of training that we would really want people to have relative to food safety, is a program called La Cocina, and that I was very interested in determining whether or not unlike we did with the healthy nail salons, where we didn't create more regulation, but we created an opportunity for folks to participate in these new kinds of businesses in a different way that would include public kitchens where there's training and the like, that I was curious about their interest in it. And I would like you, if you wouldn't mind, just to take a look at the La Cocina model and just to give the board feedback, perhaps through committee, about what that model looks like and what opportunities might be created there. Was really my major point. And I will just, so if you wouldn't mind doing that. And then the second thing I would just say is I wanted to do a very special thank you both to Michael and to Mike Wasserman, because we have this program, as you all know, our Healthy Nail Salon program, that allows people to opt in to being a healthy nail salon. And in order to really promote that and to get our healthy nail salons being used by the public, Supervisor Wasserman, shush, I know who you are, Supervisor Wasserman and Michael both got pedicures with me at the Blossom Hill Nail Salon, and they, even though they were a little weirded out by the exfoliation and all that, they did a really good job, and I really just wanted to say how much I appreciated their participating, and it really got a lot of attention, and I wanted to say a very big thank you to both of them. And that's been a really effective program. And
may I interrupt through the chair?
Sure, although I believe the government acronym here is TMI, but I'm going to let that...
Thank you. So I want to thank Supervisor Chavez for inviting Michael and I to be part of that, and the effort her idea came up with. I think there's something like 150 salons now in the Healthy Nail Salon out of 800, and it's growing every week because of her offer. At the same time, she talked us in to having our big toes painted in teal with a shark fin on it. And I want you all to know Michael and I still have the shark fin as long as they're still playing.
That's right.
Go Sharks.
I wanted to, just on that note, the reason I was looking at La Cocina is it's a volunteer program. The Healthy Nail Salons was a volunteer program, and they're both doing really well. And please thank your staff for all their work.
Yeah, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah Chavez. My interjection regarding the status of the cleanup measure, which I think is AB 377, if I remember correctly, was not meant as commentary about how I felt one way or the other about AB 626. I'm actually quite open-minded about it. I know Mr. Ballier has concerns about how do we provide the flexibility we might like to provide consistent with our obligation to provide the health protections that we're also obliged to provide. My reason for interjecting on that point is just this, at the risk of stating the obvious, it makes it difficult for us to do our work when people move legislation through the system that, as they say in the Capitol, isn't fully cooked yet, and which may be but that's what they say. And I'm a little frustrated that our efforts to try and implement are stymied by the fact that, as a practical matter, we can't do a thing until we know what the rules are, and the rules are still in a state of flux. I wanted, however, to go to what I think is AB 2178, the Charitable Feeding Program, and ask us, because I think we've got a new FTE in the budget for that program. Am I reading this right? Yes?
That would be one of the assignments, but yes.
Okay. Could you tell us a little bit about what that would entail, please?
Sure. So AB 2178 was a new bill that we sponsored last year with our professional organization. And the gist of it is that a lot of the charitable organizations out there who serve people in need have been subject to the same stringent requirements as a restaurant or grocery store. And unfortunately, it put environmental health in a very difficult position of either having to shut them down or have them pay really expensive fees to upgrade the upgrade to commercial kitchens. So what this did is establish a middle ground where they can actually have the ability to serve food to those in need and in some instances, and support food donations from perfectly edible food sources, such as high-tech cafeterias and that sort of thing. And the larger and broader implications are that we are also under a state mandate to divert 75% of our organics waste, which oftentimes includes a significant amount of food waste, from the landfills by, I think it's 2025. So, this is part of a broader goal to make it easier to serve people who are in need, people who are food insecure, and provide a reasonable pathway and some regulatory relief, but still with a focus on food safety.
Thank you. Colleagues, the reason I wanted to highlight this is I'm guessing that every member of the board has heard at some point from folks in their community, nonprofits broadly, and the faith community in particular, who have said, hey, look, we would like to try and help the least among us, and I would like to make sure people have a decent hot meal, but we can't really do that given the state of the law here in California. And so this middle ground, as Mr. Balliet describes it, this is an issue that I've had a chance to talk with the Consumer and Environmental Protection Agency about, and appreciate that. This middle ground holds some hope, I gather, for allowing faith groups and other nonprofits to sort of step in and provide the help that they are anxious to provide. My assessment, Mr. Balliet, and please correct me if you think my anecdotal observations are wrong, but is that we've sort of had two responses to this. Some people have just said, well, if I'm not allowed to do it, I won't do it, which means people aren't getting served. And other people have sort of scofflawed their way through it, hoping that people would look the other way. And neither of those are particularly desirable outcomes. So I just wanted to highlight this, say I'm enthusiastic about it, and hope that you and the county executive will keep us posted on whether we have sufficient resources to take advantage of the law at the state level, because it's not like we don't need more help out there. We certainly do. Thank you. Colleagues, anything else on Consumer and Environmental Protection Agency? If not, without objection, we'll consider this item heard and considered. Thank you very much, and we'll turn to Mr. Ituria. Thanks again.
Next, we have the Roads and Airport Department, and the recommended budget for the Roads and Airport Department is $98.9 million. It includes actions to add resources to increase support and oversight for Sanitation District 2 and 3, resources to improve road maintenance yards, and support traffic engineering, as well as to acquire additional road material. It replaces vehicles and heavy-duty equipment and upgrades and maintains our signal and electrical facilities. There are adjustments for labor costs in the capital projects and appropriation to implement capital projects. And at this point, I see we've got staff here to assist with questions on the road department.
I have a quick one that I'm just going to jump in with. Let me say thanks to the folks at Roads for helping to clarify. I had asked some questions about pavement index, and if I've learned what I think I've learned, and let me just look to staff to confirm this, the methodology we use for pavement condition index is MTC based. Do I have that right? If you can use that mic, that'll be great. And not only is it MTC based, but the MTC methodology we use uses data that is from 2 years ago. Do I have that right as well?
That's correct.
So by definition, every time one of us asks you a question about our pavement condition index in our district, we're always going to be 2 years behind, which is to say wrong, unless we know to say, don't use the MTC methodology, tell us what's really happening on the ground. Did I get that right?
That's correct.
Okay. So just for those of you who are trying to figure out what's going on in your district, maybe everybody else already knew that. I didn't. I kept thinking when I was looking at the numbers, why are they as bad as they are? And then when I would go to Roads, they say they're not as bad as that because we've actually done the following work in the last 2 years, and therefore life is better than you think it is, which is a nice thing to learn, but it is a little awkward if people are trying to figure out where things stand without knowing that. All right. Thank you. Supervisor Chavez, I see your light is on.
Thank you. I am interested, I know we have an item coming before us next week to look at the planning for Reed Hillview in particular, and I was just wondering, mostly because I haven't seen it, but also just to make sure I understand this as it relates to this next step. That study, we anticipate that will take how long?
Well, right now, the way we're proposing that item on next Tuesday, it's really a joint item between the Roads and Airports Department and the Fleet and Facilities Department. And in working with Fleet and Facilities, we've settled on hopefully an 8-month process that we think we would get through the public process associated with that.
So if that item moves forward next week, it would be 8 months from June. So would June start with a June start date?
I'm pretty confident that that's what the staff recommendation is, a June start date with 8 months, and I believe we're looking at completion in February.
Great. Thank you.
Forgive me. Others on this item, colleagues? Nope. Then without objection and hearing none, we'll consider Roads Department received and heard. Mr. Ituria, to you for the next item.
Okay, the next is same overall department, but for the airport's budget. I know we already had one question on the airports, but total recommended budget is $3.1 million, and it does include allocating funding for the replacement of 2 tractors out there.
I see Mr. Wasserman.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm just going to raise again my concerns when we had the discussion about the airport and federal fund and lead in the air and all the rest, that the majority at the time was in favor of not pursuing the federal funding. And Harry, is Eric here?
No.
No, okay. You and Eric brought up at the time the dollar amount of the deferred maintenance that's needed to be done at the 2 airports, mostly Reed Hillview, but at both airports. And you also brought up the annual amount for maintenance, both of which to replace the federal funding that we're currently not accepting and have not accepted for 7 years. So I guess I would ask you, perhaps through the CEO or you directly, Harry, to address that issue for the board here at this time. What's the anticipated way of funding what needs to be done to ensure safety and desirability at our airports?
Well, so just to give a little bit of background, the Airport Enterprise Fund, the AEF, that's what we're talking about. It's a $2 million fund. It received a loan from the general fund last year of $3 million, and we used that $3 million to pave the runways at Reed Hillview and to pave the runways at the San Martin Airport. So the runway surfaces at both airports are in good condition. If we were doing an MTC report, we wouldn't report on them in 2 years, but that's a whole other subject. We are going to need additional maintenance out there. The taxiways are going to need some work. The aprons are going to need some work. So we will be bringing forward recommendations to fund those. And if the AEF, the Airport Enterprise Fund, can't afford it, we would ask for general fund dispensation. We'd work that through the county executive's office as we do any other budget proposals. We didn't really make any this year because the runways are in pretty good shape. But that probably won't hold. Remember that there's really 2 categories of improvements at the airports. There's a category of improvements that would be eligible for federal funding, and that's mostly for the movement of the aircraft. But there's categories of improvements that are necessary that would not be eligible for funding and would typically be carried by the Airport Enterprise Fund. And that's why we wrote the business plan, because it showed a way of generating more revenue to help pay for that portion of the facility that also needs improvements. And what I'm referring to are the buildings, the aprons, the lighting, the parking lots, and so on and so on. So that's my response to that question.
Thank you.
Supervisor Chavez.
Thank you. I just had one other question, and that is, and it may not be a question just for you, so this might be a fleets and facilities question as well. And that is I had an opportunity to see a presentation yesterday at the Bay Area Air Quality Management District Board where they were showing new equipment, tractors, trucks, really heavy equipment that moves other, like pallets and other things around the airports and around the port of Oakland, and they were all electric. And I'm wondering, is that something that we are also looking carefully at as it relates to heavier equipment?
So I have seen some of the newest equipment available, heavy equipment, and some of the newest battery-operated equipment. It's pretty what I'd call exotic right now. Certainly, it could be even used for roads maintenance. I haven't actually seen the airport equipment. You said it's being used at Oakland today?
It's being used at the Port of Oakland and the Oakland Airport.
Okay. I want to take a look at what they're using. A lot of airports, in order to reduce their environmental footprint, do switch to propane. You know that the San Jose and Mineta Airport just purchased a fleet of electric buses to replace their LPG fleet, a liquid propane fleet that they had used before, again, for those clean air purposes. So I'll definitely look into that. And we're familiar with the technology. The new tractors that we're buying are going to have the most advanced kind of diesel technology, and we've been working on the diesel-free proposals as well. So,
you know, I have to say, advanced diesel technology it sounds like clean coal, yeah. But what I would just recommend, if before we make a purchase, if you could reach out to the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, and I would just want you to do two things. One, talk to them about the particular equipment you're trying to pursue, because they're putting together a really great database of equipment retailers that are selling this equipment. But the second thing is, I think it's also an opportunity for us to look to them and CARB to see if there are any kind of opportunities for grants to be able to buy these down, because I think they're trying to introduce them. And particularly, there's a high level of interest in the diesel Free by 33 campaign. So there's a little bit of money behind it. I think it's worth us taking a look at.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else on airports, colleagues? If not, then we'll say the matter is received and considered, and we'll go on to the next item, Mr. Ituria, after I say thank you again to staff.
Okay, the next item is County Sanitation District 2 and 3, and the recommended budget for the County Sanitation District 2 and 3 is $9.3 million. It includes recommended actions to increase resources for accounting, management, and engineering services, as well as the allocation of funds for repair and replacement of the joint use interceptor. And if there are any questions regarding this budget, we have staff available to help.
Colleagues, any questions or comments? If not, we'll say thank you to staff for racing down, but the matter is considered, received, and considered by our board. So thank you very much. Takes us to the next item, Mr. Ituria.
And the next item is the Parks and Recreation Department. And the recommended appropriation for the Parks and Recreation Department budget is $77.7 million. It includes recommended actions to add resources to purchase fixed assets, to augment park staff to coordinate countywide trails, and to enhance visitor experience, enhancing physical analysis, as well as it also provides funding for the Parks Capital Program. And I see that Mr. Roach is here to help with any questions that we have from the board.
Colleagues? I have just one issue that Mr. Roach, either you or Dr. Smith could perhaps help with. And colleagues, you may recall that during this past year, we had a $590,000 appropriation for the Historical Heritage Grant Program. And, my understanding is that we had something like 1.6 million in qualified requests, meaning requests that actually met the threshold criteria and were deemed qualified for application. So, something like 2.5, 3 to 1. This year, the current proposal, as I understand it, is to knock it back down to $90,000, which, given the level of pent-up demand, seems to me to be regrettable. So I guess I'm asking if we thought we had the ability to restore the funding at least to last year's level, given the level of demand that I think continues to exist. Dr. Smith, you want me to start with you or go to Mr. Rocha? How would you like to proceed?
Yeah, he really can't answer that. I'll
Okay.
answer.
Well, I don't see him leaning in, so I'm happy to turn to you. Thank
Unless
you.
he has a $500,000 in his pocket.
No.
Okay. We put it into last year's budget as a one-time fund. This year, as we've been expressing multiple times, we expect the general fund to be tight. And anticipation of a robust request for inventory items, we thought only wise not to put it in the recommended budget, but to rethink it in the revised budget and put it in if we ended up having additional funds, meaning there were less enterprise or inventory items than we expected.
Well, we've got
what?
We've got, excuse me. Apologize. We do have the grant program out there that is working its way through the process, which provides district by district funding, and we also have the funding that Supervisor Chavez championed for what has loosely been referred to as women's monuments, but is really broader than that. But this is a specific set of historic heritage grant requests that meet specific criteria, where our Historic Heritage Commission actually assesses, judges, prioritizes, and again, we had lesser amounts in the budget for a great many years during the lean years, quote unquote, and I understand the concern that we may be looking at lean years ahead. But what I observed last year, which has proven to be the case, is that by virtue of the fact that there were all those years of lean funding from the county, we're now at a place where there's a lot of pent-up demand. And fortunately, since almost all of these are projects where there needs to be other local funding, there's some commitment out there to provide that local funding. So I'm going to ask the exec and hope that others will share my interest in making sure that those funds are available again at least a flat level. But $90,000 isn't going to get the job done. Colleagues, anything else on this item? All right, then if not, we'll say thank you very much. Parks and Rec is received and considered. And that takes us to the next item.
And the next item is the Santa Clara County Central Fire Protection District. And the recommended budget for the Santa Clara County Central Fire Protection District is a budget for ongoing expenses of $129.8 million and one-time expenses of $4.6 million, and it includes one-time allocations of $6.2 million for fixed assets. And I see that we've got Chief Bowden here available to help with questions regarding the Santa Clara Central Fire Protection District.
Great. Chief, welcome. Colleagues, questions, comments? Good to go? Then we'll say thank you, Chief. Eloquent as always. And we will consider that item received and considered. And then, Mr. Itieri, that takes us to the next item on our agenda.
And the next item on our agenda is the Los Altos Hills County Fire District.
Thank you. And let me ask the two representatives of the district to introduce themselves for members of the board and the public. Hang on, that's a tricky system down there, apparently.
Okay, thank you. Nice to be here. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I'm Jay Logan, General Manager for Los Altos Hills County Fire District.
Hello, and I'm George Tyson. I'm a commissioner.
Thank you very much both for being here. Mr. Itieri, you want to go ahead and lead off on this one?
Sure. The recommended budget for the Los Altos Hills County Fire District is currently at $7.8 million in expenses, and tentatively 4.7 noted for reserves. However, there is still additional amounts that are being developed for implementation to be brought to the Board of Supervisors in the June budget hearing as well. And so there will be additional information brought forward at that time. So just a disclosure to the board.
Thank you. Let me just go to Dr. Smith on this. What I'm noting as absent for the first time in a number of years is the various projects and programs that are proposed. Typically, these are in the $3.5 to $5.5 million range. I understand this year it's up to $6.656 million for things that I would broadly describe as fire prevention. I think that that's what the bulk of them are. Dr. Smith, is that in the budget?
Mr. President, that was inadvertently left out of the budget and will be before you back in June with a rebalanced budget for the Los Altos Hills Fire District.
Great, thank you. And Ms. Logan, if I can just confirm with you, your local commission has approved that expenditure of $6,656,000 as part of your budget deliberations, yes?
Yes, that is correct. Those are programs and projects very important to wildfire protection, disaster protection. We have agreements now in play that will expect access to those funds. So
Thank you.
Pretty much the heart of the program.
And again, this is consistent with what you've been doing the last 3-4 years, if not longer, yes?
That is correct. These expenditures are anchored between the 2015 strategic plan adopted by the Board of Commissioners and also anchored by the expenditures in the budget that was submitted, and also are part of the CWPP Community Wildfire Protection Plan. So all of these expenditures anchor amongst those three prongs.
Thank you very much. Then, unless there are additional comments or questions, I'm going to ask that we consider this item received and considered, and we'll look forward to seeing the full budget complement, including the $6,656,000 before us as part of the budget for our consideration in June. Thank you again. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Smith. And thank you, Mr. Iteria. Others? All right, we're now on to the South Santa Clara County Fire Protection District.
Thank you. And the recommended budget for the South Santa Clara Fire Protection District is a budget of $6.4 million for ongoing expenses and almost $300,000 for one-time expenses towards fixed assets. And if I see that we have the chief here, if we have any questions of the district.
And comments or questions from members of the board? Supervisor Wasserman.
Thank you. I just want to say, same with Chief Bowden, but I just want to say thank you for all the men and women that work for you, and again, as well as County Fire. And it was my honor yesterday to be at the Blue and Gold, the Gilroy Blue and Gold celebration, and to hear you honor a young man under your employ. So thank you for all you do.
All right, then if that's the only comment or question, then we will consider that item received and considered. It's been a long process here, so thank you very much. Next item would be adjourn, Mr. Iteria, is that correct?
That's correct. This would be the conclusion of the workshop, and just a reminder to everyone that the budget hearing on the recommended budget and adjustments to that recommended budget will be starting on June 10th at 10:30 p.m. and it will go over the course of the week, with Monday having an overview and review of the finance and government operations items, and the Tuesday with Health and Hospital Committee and Public Safety Justice, and then on Wednesday we'll cover the child and family DFC. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get the acronym right. It's Hewlett and CSFC. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we adjourn, colleagues, I just want to say, one of the reasons that our budget deliberations go as smoothly as they usually do is because we've had these workshops ahead of time. That being said, I do know that when there's been some interest on the part of one or more board members at making adjustments in the June budget, that has sometimes thrown staff for a loop, because staff has said, well, then we're going to have to adjust our other budget numbers. I just want to ask Dr. Smith and Mr. Ituria, please preserve the policy and budget-making prerogatives of our board for all 5 members, so that when we get to those deliberations, if board members have real-time changes, that they are able to do that. Any problem with that?
It only has to add up at the end. That's fine.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I mean, you know, it is a policy of the board that if new recommendations come from the board, they have to come concurrent with recommendations for reductions.
Fair enough. Then, with that understanding and without objection, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much.